Picture this. You get home from a really rough workout. You honestly just felt like complete shit. Even the warm-up and the cool down felt pretty challenging. Feeling frustrated and already down, you decide to log on to Strava to justify to all of your followers what had happened that day. But before you do that, you decide to scroll through and see everyone's training for that day. As you see everyone's runs, you slowly start to become even more upset and more frustrated with how your workout went that day. Instantly, you start just beating yourself up. You start asking yourself, why can't I be fast like that person? Why can't I always feel good like this person? Why can't I constantly be improving like everyone else? Instantly, in a matter of seconds after logging onto that app, you drain yourself from any motivation or reassurance that was left. All that is left now is embarrassment and disappointment. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about comparisons in running. I think runners are especially susceptible to comparisons in running because of the hard data and the numbers in the sport. With social media and apps for running like Strava, we are constantly comparing ourselves even when we don't mean to. When we log into our phones, we are constantly taking in what other people are doing and the highlights of their lives. And while I think there is a time and place and it's awesome to share your accomplishments on social media, I do it all the time, I also think it's really easy to fall into the comparison trap, especially when something isn't going the way you wanted to, or run just didn't go as planned. You might be feeling a little bit more upset or emotional, which in my opinion makes us a little bit more vulnerable to those comparisons. As someone who falls into the comparison trap literally all the time, I really do think that it can hinder our progress and hinder our training. Additionally, outside of running, it can really hurt our self-esteem and then in turn hurt our overall happiness. This all being said, I want to discuss some things that you should consider when you find yourself caught up in the comparison game. And when I say comparisons, now this could be you comparing yourself to other runners, other people, but this could also be you comparing yourself to someone you once were or running times that you once did sometime in the past. So the first thing that you should always keep in mind are life circumstances. Now a lot of things fall under life circumstances. So what I mean by them is what your job is maybe, what your sleep patterns are, your mental health, your stress levels, and perhaps your support system around you. These are all things that as we go throughout life can really have an effect on our running and our training, and I really think it's important to keep them in mind when you find yourself comparing your runs to someone else's. For example, you might be a nurse who works 3 night shifts a week. You know, that is hard. That is really hard to train 100% off of while also focusing on getting adequate sleep, adequate recovery, and adequate nutrition. So it really just doesn't make sense to try to expect yourself to level up with someone who can have a little bit more priority on sleep, running, and training. Another example, maybe you had an awesome career in college, but also maybe in college you were able to train with the team every single day. You had access to sports medicine, access to an on-campus sports dietitian, and you had time and energy to really focus on your training. Now, maybe out of college, although you want to focus on training and running still, and you're trying your best to do so, your job might require you to be on your feet all day. It might be very demanding. It might be crazy hours like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., which leaves the only training hour for you either very early in the morning or in the later evening and night hours in the dark. And then you have to also keep in mind the nutrition and the strength training and the stretching and all of the details. You know, it's so hard to perform at that same level that you did in college with all those new circumstances. The point is that your life is gonna look different all the time, and it's gonna go through so many different phases. And some of those phases are going to allow you to prioritize running and training and your goals, and some won't. And I just think it's really important to keep that in mind and to understand that. The next thing you should keep in mind is how unique your fitness level is to you. Unfortunately, but also kind of in a cool way if you think about it, genetics play a huge role in our running capability. Now, I'm definitely not discrediting any of the hard work really talented runners do. You know, in the sport of running, you get out of it what you put into it, and it is required to work hard. But there's also just something to be said for the role that genetics play and our potential in this sport. You know, you can do all the same workouts, all the same strength training, all the same mileage. You can do even more, pay even more attention to the details, and still never be as fast as the person in front of you. Now, this is something that can be really hard to swallow. It's something that I don't really like to accept still. I don't find it fair, and I find it defeating and really frustrating. But at the same time, there is truth to it. So sometimes you just have to accept accept that truth, and it can really help with comparison. Accepting that fact can allow yourself to give yourself grace and just focus on the goals that are right for you, and also realize just how awesome your unique fitness level is to you and your own individual. It allows you to accept where you are and where you are going. And something that's awesome about it is that literally no runner can ever be like you or will ever be like you. So although it's really frustrating and kind of defeating, at the same time, think about how awesome and like beautiful it is that so many different runners of different abilities can come together on race day and focus on their own goals, but also just have such a role in the community as well. Next, I think it is so important to ask yourself, who do these comparisons benefit? Remind yourself that your purpose for running isn't tied to anyone else but yourself. Remind yourself to keep running for the healthiest and for the right reasons. It's really important to recognize those days that you might feel a little bit more vulnerable to comparisons. And if you are feeling a little bit off or you are feeling a little bit upset, I encourage you to approach social media with caution. At the end of the day, remind yourself how far you have gotten and how far you will continue to go if you just keep showing up for yourself. Your work should never ever go discredited, and you should never feel invalidated. Run for yourself, no one else. Next time you find yourself beating yourself up after comparing yourself to someone else or someone else's run, I want you to create a list, whether this is in your head, on your phone, or on a piece of paper. Create a list of all the attributes that you are proud of in running and outside of running. Write down your goals and remind yourself why you focused on these goals in the first place and why you made that decision to go after them. Remind yourself that you are exploring the best runner and best person that you can be. At the end of the day, that's what matters, exploring your own potential and exploring your own limits. Now, keeping all these things in mind and avoiding comparisons is so much easier said than done. Like I said before, in this day and age with social media, we are constantly comparing ourselves even when we don't mean to or when we don't know it. But hopefully, with these considerations and approaching social media with caution, we can kind of almost avoid the comparisons and kind of eliminate the feelings that might come with them. Also, don't be afraid to go your own path and be your own person and be your own runner and focus on that. You know, last week I decided to give up Strava once and for all. And while that app is becoming more and more popular in the distance running community, I decided that it really just wasn't benefiting me anymore. And while I've taken breaks from it in the past, I always come back to it because I do love it. I love to see all the amazing runs, workouts, and races that my friends and former teammates have done and continue to do. The comparisons were really starting to get to me. So I just need to take a step back and eliminate all triggers, and Strava unfortunately was one of them. But you know what? That's okay. And even though I miss it and part of me, has a little bit of FOMO not on the app, I just know that I feel more free and feel more connected with myself and my body when I'm just focusing on running for me and not how many followers I have on that app. Now, I don't mean to talk about these considerations with comparisons in a form of an excuse. I think healthy competition is required to succeed in this sport, and I think it's really important and also really fun. I'm just talking about these considerations to maybe help you next time you're really starting to feel down and it's starting to have a negative impact on your training, your running, and your relationship with yourself. So if you have any other ways that help you deal with comparisons in running and comparisons in general, because like Theodore Roosevelt said, comparisons are the thief of joy, and I really believe that. If you have any other ways that help you, definitely feel free to leave them in the comments below. I would love to know. And if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. As always, I would love for you to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will see you next week in my next video, but until then, happy running. If you hear any panting in the video, it's because I just took Sansa for a walk. It's like 90 degrees outside here, and she is still trying to cool down, so she is panting and right by my side.